Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ted Gardner. I'm an interviewer with the Library of Congress Oral History Project, which is so capably put on by our wonderful public library here in Cincinnati. Dennis Daly is our videographer, historian, World War II history buff, and so forth and so on. We're lucky today to have a dear friend of mine to interview, and his name is Jim Robinson. And Jim is a Cincinnatian. Jim, where were you born?
Born in Amelia, up in Claremont County, Amelia, Ohio.
Downtown Amelia.
On a farm about 3 miles out.
How about that? When were you born?
1922.
Okay.
I'm old.
You're coming up on number 87.
87.
Right?
Yeah.
How about that? Now, tell us about your family. Did you have brothers and sisters?
I had a sister, that's all.
Mm-hmm.
And on the farm, and that's all I had.
So your family were farmers? They raised
Yeah, my
crops,
dad
or
was farm. Well, we did about everything. We had fruit orchards. We raised tobacco. An interesting point on that, if I may, for a moment.
Oh, absolutely.
White burley tobacco was discovered during the Civil War on my great-grandfather's farm. He was, again, a lot of military. He was captain, G Company, 59th Ohio. He was down Stones River in a battle down there when it was discovered up in Higginsport. In fact, I was up there last Sunday. They had the monument, and they had a guy portray him. Portrayed it. I got to meet reenactor. And what was interesting about him was he said if my ancestors could see me right now in a Union captain uniform, he's from Mississippi.
Oh my
he always does Confederates, so
how about that?
it was kind of funny. Yeah,
that's
kind of funny. But anyway, they were my dad family was from there, and the full family is I'm quite proud of it. Couts Albert, he was an admiral, rear admiral. Graduated from Annapolis. August Couts.
Now, where did he serve?
He's Civil War. These are Civil War, going all the way back to Civil War. And then Uncle August, and one interesting thing about him, he wrote books on customs and orders for commission, non-commission, and company clerks, I think is the other one. And still in print today on 10-3 printing, believe it or not. Okay. Required reading at the West Point.
Oh boy!
So
he was a real scholar.
Wasn't he? Yeah. And but anyway, back to answer your question, we raised tobacco, we had dairy cattle, fruit orchards. Dad raised also Duroc Jersey hogs, breeder, so forth. And
that's fascinating, and that is so, that is so Ohio.
Yeah.
I mean, that is just wonderful. I love to hear things like that. Well, now, where did you go to school? Where did you start school?
Well, I went to Amelia. In fact, my first grade was in a one-room schoolhouse on White Oak Road, right outside of Amelia.
Is that building still there?
No, it's long gone, long gone. Yeah. And then I graduated from Amelia, went to Ohio State in 1941 it would be, I guess. Yeah, 41, 42. Because to start what you want to cover, in 42, I enlisted in what they call the ERC, Enlisted Reserve Corps. Right. Sworn in, but in active duty.
Now, I always like to bring this out because in everybody's life, there are certain points, certain dates that one never forgets where he or she was on that date. Where were you on the 7th of December, 1940?
I was in the Ohio Theater. I knew you were going to ask me.
Oh, you did? Right down here?
Yeah, I was in the Ohio, no, up in Columbus.
Oh.
I was at Ohio State. I went to Ohio State. And I was came out of the theater, and there was a newsboy shouting Pearl Harbor bomb, Pearl Harbor bomb. And had no idea, never heard of Pearl Harbor.
Huge headlines on the paper.
Yeah. In fact, I have a paper at home to cover that. Yeah.
Something?
And so that was kind of the beginning there, and eventually in 42, because my discharge even reads that from 42 to almost 46.
Did you have Did you have a particular desire for a branch of the military?
I wanted to go in the Air Force. In fact, of course, I took ROTC at Ohio State.
Sure.
And those were the old, out of World War I howitzers, 75 howitzers. Did that, and then when I enlisted there, and then I got carried away, I guess, I'd come home to Amelia, and there wasn't any guys. It was a great thing with girls, because, you know, you had all the girls, girls all over the place. Pardon me?
You couldn't handle them all.
No, I'm not trying. But anyway, I just got, I was ready to go in, you know, I wanted to go. And I told them in April '43, put me on active duty, and they obliged without too much difficulty.
Steps in life, rites of passage. Let's drop back just a little bit. Where did you go to high school?
Amelia.
Amelia High.
Yeah.
So you're Amelia
All the way. Yeah.
Right up to college days. And what made you decide to go to The Ohio State University?
My dad went there.
Oh, okay.
My father.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he went there.
And was he an engineer?
Well, I'll tell you, let me clear that a little bit.
Yeah.
I wanted to really go to Miami is where I wanted to go. In fact, I had a roommate. I had a room in David Swing Hall and what have you up there at Miami. And then I went to a 4-H camp, if I remember, somehow. Then the junior dean of agriculture came down, got a hold of me and convinced me to transfer to Ohio State for Smith Hughes teaching.
Right.
I wanted to coach.
Well, that was great.
And
Great
he got me to move up there and or transfer up to Ohio State. So
and of course, it's interesting about your going into the ROTC at Ohio State, because Ohio State was a land-grant college.
Yeah.
That was one of the requirements. You had to go the first 2 years in a land-grant college. Then it was optional after that. So what did you do? You went downtown in Columbus and signed up, or how did
you know, it was so long ago, I don't remember. I guess could it have been on campus or?
Maybe they had something on
campus.
campus.
I might have gone down. I don't know. I don't recall.
And they said, what did they say to you? You're infantry or what?
Well, I know. Well, I went in, and then when I went over came down here in inductions, or not induction center, I took a physical right downtown Cincinnati. And then I went over to Fort Thomas, and they said, what do you want to go into, you know? And I said, I want Air Force. I want to go Air Force. And they're very what have you, and of course you go where they decide to put you.
Sure.
And since I had the artillery background up at Ohio State, automatically I went to Fort Bragg for field artillery.
Well, that was quite a jolt, wasn't it, going across to North Carolina?
Down south there. I got a little, this is jokingly, but I claimed title to the best trained soldier come out of Fort Bragg in World War II. I had 30 weeks basic training. I'm either a slow learner or 30, well, what happened? It probably saved my life, because it was a 13-week cycle in field artillery down at Bragg on 105s, 105 millimeter howitzer.
Right, big boys.
Yeah, well, medium, actually. The 155s were the bigger ones, yeah. And a 240 was a real big one. Wow. But anyway, I got to about the 12th week, and it was so hot we took our bunks out in the street. And I woke up in the morning, and I'm hurting right here underneath my ears. And I went over to the dispensary. Doc took a look at me, hell soldier, he said, you got swollen glands, but you run the fever, get over to hospital. I got to send you to hospital. Went over there, and the doc said, swollen glands. He said, you got the mumps. I had mumps. So I went in the hospital there 9 days, and I was trying to make air cadets all at the same time. I had been interviewed, I'd been tested, the whole thing. And then I went back to my battery. They were set up by batteries then, called batteries. I went back to that, and I'm in the orderly room, and I called Pope Field to find out whether I made cadets or not. And I said, we're shipping out. We're down to about 10 guys out of the battery. You know, they're all sending out the line outfits. And the T5 in there, he said, you're Robinson, aren't you? I said, yeah. He said, you're not going anywhere. You missed too much basic. You had too many days. They had me 28 days. They had my records screwed up. But Anyway, you said you got to go to 2nd Regiment, do another cycle. That was 17 weeks. That's where I got to 30. So anyway, I went, and I had a girl up in Raleigh. I was going every weekend up to see her. But anyway, I wound up going to 2nd, did 17. If I had finished and shipped out where I was supposed to, I'd have gone into gliders, Pac 75s, and I would have gone in on D-Day.
You were lucky.
Because they lost a lot of guys. A lot of guys I was with.
Oh, the mortality rate on that was just
Flying
terrible.
coffins.
Terrible.
Plywood.
Yeah.
It was a one-way flight. You took the wings off and they come in.
Well, now, your training there at Bragg, again, how long was that, 17 weeks?
Well, it was supposed to be 13, but
13.
then the way it wound up, I wound up 30 weeks. But
Now, you met a lot of guys, and here you were from a small community in Ohio, and first time you'd ever been that far away from home, probably.
yeah,
Yeah.
probably
and
so, probably
all
right.
of a sudden, you're thrown in with a bunch of
Yeah,
guys from
yeah.
all over the country, and
right.
anybody left over that you still keep in touch with?
What do you mean? Well, from
was there anybody
basic,
that
you
you
mean?
went all the way through with?
No,
No,
not really. No.
Well, that was typical too.
Yeah. Well, there is a guy, in fact, you may even recognize the name, Milt Partridge. He was Dean of Education at Xavier. And he and I were in the same battalion together.
Okay.
Yeah. Milt Partridge, Dr. Partridge, got his doctorate.
Oh,
And Milt was also at Bragg. And we were a shipment when we went out of there, when I finished the 17. When we went out, you'd never know where you're going. You have no idea. And we wound up Camp Gruber, Oklahoma, and here's all these trucks lined up with 643rd TD, tank destroyer. And they really got murdered in North Africa.
Wow.
Because they had a half track with a 105 mounted on there. And then they lost a lot of guys. But
Was that kind of equipment, Jim, was that something that was less than the best?
yeah. At the time, I guess they thought it was great.
Yeah.
But even which I can get to in a moment, but I wound up, from there, as I say, we joined the 643rd, which came out of Connecticut National Guard. And the equipment even we had then, which I call one of the dumbest weapons that ordnance ever developed, was a half-track pulling a 3-inch gun. And McNair, General Leslie McNair, got the idea that this was a great weapon. And we got a lot of guys came out of the 610 or 608 TD battalion, and they were M10s, which was a good one. That was a 3-inch mounted, and tank destroyers, to say they're open, as you heard me mention out there. So we couldn't button up. Typically on a tank, you can pull the lid down and you can button up, but we couldn't. But anyway, back to the towed load. To go into action, it was strictly a defensive weapon, because you had to uncouple, you had to get the TD the half track off the road, turn the gun around. This is what happened to us in the Bulge when we went in.
By that time, you could have been wiped out.
Oh yeah. And it's like, wait a minute, we're not ready,
Yeah.
We got to turn this gun around here. But,
Rules.
Yeah. So it's really a stupid weapon,
Oh my gosh.
and that's what we had when we went in the Bulge. And
You went into the Bulge with that?
yeah.
You were inside one of those things.
That was a 10-man crew. I was a loader on that one.
Oh, a 10-man.
10-man crew, gun, ammunition handlers. We're in a half track. And when we went in, I don't know where you want to pick up on over there in Europe. But,
Well, first of all, let me interpose here. You left Bragg.
I went to Gruber.
Huh?
Camp Gruber, Oklahoma.
That's right.
Near
Oklahoma.
Muskogee.
So then you had to come by train across to the
We
east
left after we finished training there. And in fact, one of the crazy things in service, we left one time, we left a whole battalion, which is 850 men.
Yeah.
We went to Camp Swift, Texas, near Austin. Went down there, did absolutely nothing. So all of a sudden we turn around, come back up to Gruber, and then started getting ready to go overseas. Activated to go to Europe. Of course, we had no idea where we were going.
Where did you embark from?
Boston.
Boston.
Out of Boston.
On a transport?
That was like a Liberty ship.
Oh yeah.
The Exceller. In fact, the division or the battalion headquarters company and A company. Headquarters company, A company. We were on the Exceller, and then B and C company were on another one called the Robert Sherwood. Two different trips or ships like that.
Now this was the 634th.
643rd, yeah.
643rd.
In the battalion. But when we went to Gruber, we were going into that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've heard of that outfit before, but
There was about 75 tank destroyer battalions. We were structured and organized as battalions. And we were attached and detached and attached and detached.
And you had everything though, as far as armament was concerned. Did you have machine guns?
Well, then eventually
bore?
after the Bulge, we had the 3-inch gun. That's what we had there.
That was it.
But after the Bulge, we converted over to self-propelled.
I see.
And we went to an M18, they call it a Hellcat. And we had a aircraft engine in there, a 7-cylinder radial. And very fast. In fact, there is a M18 up in Danbury, Connecticut right now, called the Amazing Grace up there. They clocked that one at 51 miles an hour. That's a 22-ton full track. On that one, we had this is the one that we went across Germany with the 83rd. 5-man crew driver, assistant driver, gunner, which I was, loader, and a gun commander. And we had a ring mount with a 50 caliber mounted.
Now when you got across the water, where did you go in? Cherbourg?
Cherbourg. We were the first convoy into Cherbourg.
Yeah. Now, were you still under General McNair?
No. We had nothing. McNair, all he did was had the brainstorm of towed load, they called it.
I see.
The half track pulling the 3-inch gun. That was his big idea. We weren't under him. When we went into the Bulge, we were First Army under Hodges.
Oh, you were in Hodges?
Yeah, under Hodges' First Army.
Now,
Then
he was a pretty good general.
he was a good one.
Yeah.
He was a good one.
There were some that weren't too good.
Courtney Hodges, yeah.
Courtney Hodges,
Yeah,
never forget that.
He was good.
Well, that's just fascinating. So, okay, so you got ashore in Cherbourg, and you formed up, and then you started.
We were in the apple orchards, went in temporary, just off of Normandy Beach, near St. Mary Glees. I remember going up, there was the cemetery there that was from D-Day, and I mean, the graves were still dirt, and
Beautiful.
the wooden crosses and the dog tags on them. And so I went up to see that, and we were there maybe 3 weeks, something like that. It was pretty wet. We had tents where we built up the sides of them. And then from there, we moved down, crossing the Brittany, or the Channel Islands, they call them, Jersey, Guernsey Island. There's 10,000 Germans out there.
Yeah.
We just left them out there.
Jersey, Guernsey,
And, yeah.
Albany. Yeah.
And then we were there for a while. I had a little sidelight that you might be interested in. We're guarding prisoners there one night. We had no idea what we're doing. Went down, and this is kind of interesting. All of a sudden, I get a tap on the shoulder, and I turn around. It was the Luftwaffe, German officer.
Oh my God.
He said, "Pardon me." He said, "Can you tell me where C Company is?" I had no idea where C Company was. I thought, I'll find out. I said, "Where did you learn to speak such good English?" I mean, he spoke better English than I did. And he said, "Kent." He went to Kent in England.
Oh,
Kent
in
University.
England.
Yeah.
Oh, very.
Went over there, and here he is, a Luftwaffe officer.
How
you know,
about that?
very, very interesting guy.
That's
But then what becomes interesting is A Company, which I was in, 3rd Platoon, A Company, headquarters, and then they went into Recon at that time, Recon Company. We went up to Fontainebleau, about 26 miles out of Paris. That was Napoleon's cavalry school.
Historic place.
Chateau. We were in the chateau. We thought we had it made.
Yeah.
We were supposedly going to be teaching cooks and bakers because they were could run out of men or begin to get low. And we're going to teach them. And on one morning, unfortunately, about 3 in the morning, Bienkowski comes in and everybody up, roll them up, we're moving out. Where are we going? So anyway, we headed out and then started heading north up into, that would have been the 20th of December, 44. Wow. And 21st of December, we went to town of Manhay, which we had no idea. And what's interesting on that is we're going south, and here comes the third armor, a column of third armored tanks heading north. We had to pull off so they could go by. Sure. He said, the guy said, I don't know where in the hell you guys are going, but there's nothing up there but Germans. Well, we found that out. Wow. And we went in position about 7 at night.
Were the Germans entrenched at that point?
No. Well, the first I heard, we went in about 7 o'clock at night on the 21st, about 4 in the morning. I was on guard with a guy named Benny Eschball. And my buddy, we were set up one gun here, gun across the road about 75 yards away. Then there were 2 down to crossroads called Parker's Crossroads, become pretty well known now, quite a history with it. And anyway, all of a sudden I heard it was foggy, heavy fog, cold, snow. And anyway, I heard this little bit of noise, Raus, boy, hello boys. And they were being captured, taken prisoner, about 75 yards away. And I told Ben, I said, hey man, I said, that's not English, that's German. Yeah. I said, let's get everybody up, let's get the hell out of here, they're gonna attack Manhay. So we got out there and hooked up, and they're right down the road, from us. I don't know how we got out. I have no idea how we got out.
You were lucky.
We were very lucky.
Oh my God.
Because those guys were prisoners for 8 months.
Is that so?
And they had a tough time.
So?
They had a tough time.
Well, 75 yards, you could see the enemy.
Almost. And we knew where they were, but it was so foggy that morning. Yeah. And because Tom Teeter, whose brother Robert Teeter, by the way, invented cruise control for cars out of Traverse City, Michigan. Anyway, he wrote a journal. Has a copy of it if you read it sometime, called Captured. This is what happened. But anyway, he said they told him be quiet. They didn't want to alert the rest of us, But I heard him. We heard him, real plain. So we got out of there and went into Manhay. And
now you're mentioning the 20th and 21st of December,
right?
44. Where were you? How close were you to the Ardennes?
That was the Ardennes.
That was the Ardennes.
That is the Ardennes.
You were right in the forest.
Oh yeah.
You were right in the heart of the Bulge.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
For sure.
Oh my goodness sakes.
Yeah.
So that was where your action basically was.
Yeah.
Right there.
Well, we got out of there, and from there we didn't have our officer. We were missing our platoon sergeant. He had been hit pretty bad. He got Silver Star. Our lieutenant, he disappeared. We have different stories on him. Mm-hmm. I've got buddies that said they heard him saw him being interrogated by the Germans. And there's conflict because then all of a sudden he came back. Oh, he appeared. He came back, and so then we had a lieutenant again. Because all we were was a squad. We were all by ourselves. Then you
didn't have an officer.
Yeah, we didn't have an officer. So we went into, we're at Manhay, Christmas Eve, 44. This is kind of interesting.
Yeah,
this is in a book I've got for you, if you want to read it. Anyway, we're set up in the town square in Manhay, Christmas Eve. And all of a sudden, there comes it's either 3rd Armored or 7th Armored. And we're sitting there, I was loader on that. And here comes this one, here's the Sherman's coming through. This one tank looked different, And I told Mo, I said, Mo, I don't think that's one of ours, man. And they're right on top of you, as close almost as I am to you, because they're coming right by. And so anyway, it turned out to be Ernst Barkman, who was highly decorated, Iron Cross with leaves and what have you, and he knocked out, I don't know how many tanks. By mistake, he got in the column.
Gosh, oh
He,
my.
he got in the 7th Armored Column
Oh, my word.
and came through town real close to us. And I had heard it, he got knocked out, but found out he got out of the column and hid.
Uh-huh.
Hid his Panther tank.
After he got out of the column.
Yeah, he got out of the column and hid.
You should have stayed in.
Yeah.
with you guys.
Well, no, well, he was right on top of us. We couldn't have fired anyway.
No.
And then, so finally, we pulled out of there, went up a hill where we retreated. I literally saw the American Army in almost chaos. I had to get out. I couldn't even get my half track because I had to go out on a bumper. I literally rode the bumper out. And we got up on a hill there, and an officer said, "Will this gun fire?" And we said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Well, get it in action." And then because the Germans had captured the town, captured Manhay. Mm-hmm. And then another officer came along and said, "You're going to have to be careful." He said, "Jerry's got some of our equipment, you know. So what are you going to do? Here comes a Sherman tank, and all of a sudden there's Germans in it instead of,
Good.
Oh my God. It was kind of, the whole Bulge, it was unbelievable.
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
Well, now, were you anywhere near Malmedy where the...
I wasn't, but I saw Malmedy signs. Now, Milt Partridge, who I mentioned to you, who would be a great guy, he just fell and broke his neck, though. That's the trouble. Fell down the steps and broke his neck. Milt was with a lieutenant. He was like a scout with him, and they were going, I don't know where they were going, in a Jeep. He saw the bodies in the field.
He did?
Yeah. He saw the bodies.
Oh,
and
the
I didn't know.
Americans that were killed.
Yeah, 123 of them.
Oh,
And they had numbers on all of them.
Oh, my
And he saw them, and I didn't. All I ever saw was Malmedy and Bastogne.
Yeah, the signs.
Yeah, saw the signs.
Yeah.
We were at the town of Manhay, and then we wound up at Houffalaz, Spa, Stavelot.
Were you anywhere near McAuliffe? General
Well, that would have
McAuliffe?
been Bastogne. That's Bastogne.
That was Bastogne.
That's south. That was south of us.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Jimmy, tell me about the, I think your family and your friends who will see this DVD would be interested to know. For example, I always like to find out, what was your equipment like? Did you have adequate equipment, good boots, good?
Well, I remember getting.
You were in the wintertime
Yeah.
there.
Oh yeah. God.
Gee.
I remember getting combat boots, and I wanted them so bad. 'Cause we had those goofy leggings. Remember out of war with the hooks on them?
Supposed to come over the top.
Yeah, and where you got a real dumb guy was when they had the hooks inside because you catch them, you know.
Wrong side out.
Yeah, you had to get them outside, and you kind of lace them up, you know. And then we got combat boots, and I wanted them. In fact, they weren't even my size. The big thing there, it was so cold, the coldest winter in 40 years in Belgium, and you had a lot of frozen feet, a lot of frozen hands. The big secret was trying to stay dry. You had to stay dry.
Yeah, if you
And so fortunately, I never got that, but we had some guys.
Frostbite, terrible
Oh,
stuff.
frostbite, yeah, a lot of
Trench
it.
foot.
A lot of it,
Oh, gosh.
yeah.
Well, you know, it's just fascinating what you have done and what you saw. And you know, being so close to the enemy as you were.
That was weird.
You were really, now, you did get wounded. How did that happen?
Do what now?
You got wounded. How did
No,
that
no,
happen?
no.
Well,
That's
I
wrong.
thought you got a piece
No.
of shrapnel or something.
No. I didn't. I was lucky. I didn't get hit.
Oh, I see.
I didn't
Okay.
get hit, thank
All right.
God.
Okay, my
Yeah.
mistake on that. But you were fired at, weren't you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
just didn't hit you.
No. And what's interesting is the way we were set up. There's this crossroad. If you want to do some history, look up on computer. Parker's Crossroads in Belgium. That's where we were. It was there. This Parker took over out of the 82nd Air. We were attached to 82nd Airborne. That's who we were attached to then.
You were?
Yeah.
Oh.
And we're on this crossroads. See, this Route 15 went to Liège. And fortunately, if they would have kept their timetable, they were trying to get to a big gas. And one of the big reasons, remember Cunningham, when we were on with him, and he asked Walter, that, you know, we actually won, they ran out of gas.
Yes,
That was a big thing.
the Germans.
Yeah, they ran out of gas.
Yeah.
And they were trying to get to this big gas dump. And in this roadblock, we were one of the roadblocks that slowed them down.
Oh,
They were parked at crossroads.
that was really crucial, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
That they were cut off from their supplies.
Right. And,
Boy, oh boy. See, you've just lived some tremendous history.
well,
Now, you got through there. When did you finally get out of the Ardennes and out of the
well,
Bulge?
way after that, I didn't finish up on the one, when we were up on that hill.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and this guy came up, and this officer came up, he said, be careful, you know, Germans got some of our equipment. Well, how do you tell? I mean, here comes a Sherman up the road, you're not gonna fire on your own equipment. So we're by ourselves, and in all honesty, we finally said, the hell with it, let's get out of here.
Yeah.
So we took off.
Good.
And we went back and got in a barn and didn't know where we were, had no idea, and all of a sudden, whoom, because we'd gone back pretty far. Well, we found out we were right across the road from a 240 millimeter howitzer, and every time it fired, it would just lift you, it would just lift you right off the ground.
God, a 240.
Yeah.
That was a big,
But then we wound up, Lieutenant McCarthy came down, took over command of it. We finally hooked up with him. And then we went back into towns like Stavelo, I mentioned, Houffalage, and we were then with them. And then, again, you're attached and detached.
Were a number of your buddies wounded?
We lost,
and killed?
1, 2, 3, we lost 4 guys killed. We had some wounded. We had 16 taken prisoner.
No kidding.
Yeah, and out of a platoon. Just a
Well, that
platoon.
happened, and you were so lucky. That's
Yeah,
just
very
amazing.
lucky. I have no idea how we got out.
I know it.
Good Lord, his hand on us.
Oh, he really
And,
did. Well, okay, so then the idea was, now you mentioned Liège, of course, that's in Belgium.
Yeah.
That's just over the line.
Germans were trying to get to the going up Route 15, but they didn't get much further than that. They got to Manhay, and then they were in the gas problem, I guess, and then 82nd and other finally drove them back out. And then, well, the big things, so, and Danny, this is where our friend Danny White comes
Yeah.
in. The sun came out Christmas Day, '44, and then the Air Force was able to fly.
For the flyers.
Yeah, and when that happened, when they fled, then the Tigers, who we couldn't handle, you know, and then even the heavier, we saw those vapor trails up there, and I know Danny flew 3 missions that day. But anyway, that was a big turning point, because that way those fighter bombers could come in and really attack the tank columns and what have you. And then they started retreating. They had to retreat because they ran out of gas for one thing. And so anyway, that was pretty much the end of the Bulge. Ended about January 10th, I'd say, of 45. Okay.
Then did it just the environment just sort of opened up for you, so you
Yeah, then we went up into Holland. We got out of there. And even to this day, it's quite a bit of it still fuzzy and talked all that. We went into Holland, and then we converted over. Eventually, we converted to around February of 45, converted from out of that stupid half-track and towed gun to an M18 destroyer, Hellcat.
Yeah.
Which was good, except again, we could move fast, and then I became an instant gunner on that. We went out, I fired 10 rounds, and but I'd fired also out in Gruber. And then we went to 5-man crews in that, on the M18.
Now, how thick was the armor on that?
About that thick.
About an inch.
Not even that.
Less than an inch.
We used to carry the infantry, the 83rd Division.
Oh my!
We got
gosh.
attached to 83rd. That's all the armor we had.
Oh my gosh! Well,
Yeah.
that was the.
Yeah, 50 caliber would almost penetrate it.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness!
Guy had infantry. Guys had never had. I had Robbie Ohio on my steel, and there's a Robbie. He said, you know, what the hell does it stop? Not much of anything.
Oh my goodness.
So we had that, and we had an open turret, and
Yeah.
the whole thing.
Oh my God.
So
But
then
you
we
could
went.
You could close the turret. couldn't
No,
you?
We didn't have a
It
turret.
was open all the
It was
time.
all open, all the time.
Your head was up there.
And I had trouble. I had a periscopic sight and I had a telescopic sight.
Oh.
And the periscope, periscopic, you're supposed to be able, it was like this, and supposed to be able to pick up your target.
Yeah.
I had trouble with that. I couldn't do it. So I'd stick my head up to pick it up, and then go back down to get on telescopic.
Sure.
But anyway, we then got attached to the 83rd Division, which was a great division, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, or Pennsylvania. And we went across Germany with them, all the way across
Oh,
Germany.
you did.
Across the Elbe River, the town of Barbie, which is below Magdeburg. We were the only, as far as I know, American troops went over the Elbe River. We wound up 40 miles from Berlin.
How about that?
In fact, I talked to a lady last night and coming back from Milwaukee, and she's from Berlin. And I talked to her a little bit last night about it. I said,
That's interesting.
we were 40 miles from Berlin. We met the Russians there.
That's as close as you got.
Pardon me?
That's as close as you got
To Berlin.
to Berlin, yeah.
And something a little bit interesting there, when we crossed the Elbe on the other side, I had a German woman grab me by the legs and, "Nicht schießen, my Kinder, nicht schießen, my Kinder, don't shoot my children."
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna shoot your children, scared to death, because they had the propaganda,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But then, when we were over there, well, we had some pretty good, I got a locomotive, I knocked out a locomotive on Barbie. And anyway, we get across the river, across the Elbe, and we had some firefight over there. And but we finally finished that, and we're getting ready to come back over the Elbe. Everything's were pretty much winding down, and a Yak Russian fighter was up there, and I say "Ruski, Ruski," and this one of them, it wasn't the same one, I don't know what it was, but the women were petrified that the Russians were coming. With good reason, because
Yeah.
probably every one of them got
They had a
raped.
terrible
In
reputation.
fact, they'd come up to you, my name, you, my name, I go with you,
Uh-huh.
and back over the Elbe,
Sure.
because they knew what was coming.
Much.
Russians, I mean, they were,
The Yanks to
they
the
were,
Russians.
they were bad.
They were.
In fact, I got a buddy of mine, Joe stood up in Laconia. They were so-called frees by the Russians, liberated,
Yeah.
like in prison camp, Stalag 4. He said, free to hell, we were recaptured.
Yeah.
The Russians were almost as bad as the Germans were.
They were so suspicious.
Oh,
Oh, terrible.
another thing I remember, I think I may have shown you the picture. They were, when they met us, when we met them, because we're all in fatigues and
Sure.
typical. They got all their medals on, they're all dress uniform, they got their hats and the whole bit.
They were big on display.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they were.
that-
Well, Walter said that's importance to them.
Sure.
That makes them important.
Makes them important.
Yeah,
Well, that's communism.
yeah,
That's communism. Keeping
Right.
people down.
Yeah. yeah.
Well, Jimmy, now listen. Where are we now? You're working your way. You cross the Elbe. Now, when you got across the Elbe, then you went south.
Well, actually, it was pretty much over by that time. And we came back. We come back over the Elbe. We went into Harz Mountains, Bad Harzburg, and went in there, and which didn't do much of anything really, because it was pretty much done. May of '45, the war, Europe
Yep.
war ended.
Yep.
So from there, we went down the Autobahn, down to Frankfurt, and went to an airfield, Bad Nauheim, Bad Freiburg there, getting start to move to come home. And of course, then we were going to come back to America and go to invade Japan. That's
Sure.
what we were heading for there.
Oh boy, we were all
So then we rode 40 and 8s. Remember here, 40 and 8s
40
out of World War I?
40 horses.
We
deep,
rode in
man.
those, rode in those to Le Havre, Camp Lucky Strike, and left there. And we the whole battalion came back on a ship, this Sea Robin, came into Newport News, Virginia, and got 30-day furloughs, all came 30 days, and then wound up. We came back to Indiantown Gap, and from there we went to cross country, went to San Luis Obispo, California,
Oh yeah, sure.
and went into so-called. We had enough points. I had enough points. I had 54 points.
Now,
If
in
you had
that
a-
30 days furlough, did you get a chance
Gone
to
home.
come home?
Oh yeah.
Came
Oh, yeah.
home, saw your family.
Yeah.
Then you had to go back.
Then go
and
back.
then they sent you across the country.
We went across the country. We're heading for Japan, but while we're going on train to California, we dropped the bomb.
They dropped the bomb.
Dropped the
and that
atomic
was it.
bomb.
She's all over.
And they
Yeah.
changed some plans, but now the 104th, actually my discharge reads 334th Infantry Regiment, 104th Division, Timberwolves. And because we wound up attached to, because we were deactivated. Because we had, most of the guys had points.
Sure.
We'd been in, because they came out, some of them went in 41, the Connecticut Guard.
Right, right.
So,
Yeah, and those, we had some old sailors that I had contact with. I want to get back to your amazing action and so forth. Did you have personal contact with the 82nd Airborne personnel?
well, just more observation than anything else,
I
you
see.
know. I had one incident, I gotta be careful what I say. But
Well, tell it.
anyway, we went out of Manhay. The next morning, the 82nd, when we went back up trying to get to our guys, thinking, maybe they were still there. And, because, well, let's see what that would have been. Yeah, that would have been the next day. We went back up there with the 82nd, and we couldn't get to them. I have the highest respect for the paratroopers,
Oh, yeah.
medics. The one I respect more than anybody is the medics.
Yeah.
To see those guys walking in under fire with that, just all they got's that Red Cross
Sure.
bag on there.
First
But
grade.
anyway, getting back to
First
this
aid
guy,
kit.
we're sitting there. I'm sitting there on at that time in a half track with a gun,
Yeah.
and here's a curve coming around, and here comes this one paratrooper all by himself, walking all by himself, and he's cussing, and he's, I jumped in Sicily, I jumped in D-Day, and he got hit by a damn ricochet. He's bleeding out his nose, bleeding out right here, his mouth. He's walking along, just all by himself.
Tough,
Yeah.
wonderful spirit.
Yeah, he's
Oh, my
bleeding,
God.
and he's cussing all at the same time,
It reminds you of Bill Malden and his
Yeah,
cartoons,
yeah.
Billy and Joe.
Yeah,
Isn't that something?
But those guys, they were so tough. God,
Oh,
they
they
were
were
good.
tough. Oh,
And then for a while, we were attached to a 617th Regimental Combat Team, and they were crazier than the 82nd.
were they?
Yeah, they were. We had 6 of
Wild.
them. Yeah, well, we had this half track, and we had chickens on it. We had frozen, and then we had 6 of them. And of course, we had the gun, we set up covering a bridge there down this road coming down, and they wanted this tank. They said, hey, can I fire that? Can I fire that gun?
Oh, for God's sake.
And the last thing I wanted to see was a German tank.
Yeah.
We didn't want any part of that, but
Oh, my
well, those guys were fighters. God, they were good.
Did you collect any souvenirs or anything?
Yeah, well, I came back with a sailor was kind of funny. When we got on I got a Luger. I took a P-38 off a German prisoner. And then my dad wrote me and he said, son, if you get a Luger, I've heard about a Luger. Well, I traded the P-38 for a Luger.
Oh, you did?
And it really grew going pretty good. It had plastic on the handle and a picture of a gal in a bathing suit.
That was a heck of a weapon.
Yeah, that
wasn't
was a good one. And so anyway, I had that, and then we were going across Germany, and we captured a warehouse, and I and a couple other, we went up in, and we're throwing them out. It was German Zeiss. Remember the Zeiss cameras and what have you?
Sure.
They were
Optics.
Yeah, optics. German officer field glasses.
ZIS.
So I brought back 2 pair of those.
Good for you.
Yeah, I wound up selling them eventually, but
Yeah, right.
anyway, so we had that, and I got on the ship, and I'll never forget this. I know you're Navy, and this sailor come up, and he said, soldier, he said, have you got any Luger ammo? And I said, yeah, I got some. He said, how long has it been since you had ice cream? And I said, oh God, year, whatever.
Sure.
And Coke. He said, come with me. We went down the hold, Here's these big freezers they had down there. I'm down there eating ice
Made their
cream.
own ice cream.
Of course, I gave him ammo. He wanted
Sure,
some Luger
nice.
ammo.
Yeah,
I'll never forget that.
there's a Navy term for that. It's
What?
called a gee-dunk.
The what?
Gee-dunk.
What the hell does
A
that mean?
gee-dunk meant ice cream, sweets.
Is that right?
whatever. And the area in on a ship was what they called a gee-dunk stand. And once every other day, we could get a small container of homemade ice cream.
Yeah, for good.
But anyway, now, golly, you've got so many wonderful stories here, and I don't want to run out of time on important things. Let's. You got back. You got the news about the end of the war, dropping of the atomic bombs, and so forth.
Right.
So, and where were you when you got that news?
We were on a train heading for California.
You were in California?
No, we're heading for California when they dropped the bomb. Then we wound up.
So you went on to San Luis Obispo?
We went on to San Luis Obispo.
Yeah.
Camp San Luis Obispo.
Then they turned you around.
No, well, eventually. The 104th Division was there, and they were training going to Japan, going to Japan. Well, then we got deactivated, and then we wound up getting assigned over to the 104th. That's the reason my discharge reads 334th Regiment, 104th Division, because I got discharged out of the 104th, not the 643rd, which I preferred.
Right.
You know, one I would have rather had.
Well, you had a lot of spirit and a lot of camaraderie, didn't you?
Yeah.
And I mean, you got the guys that you trained with, the guys that you fought with. There's something that nobody else can understand.
I was kind of funny in a way. The company that I was in, or platoon I was in actually, 3rd Platoon, we had Paisans, Italian from New York and Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Then we had Polacks from Massachusetts, Brockton, and Mass and Stanford, all over Connecticut, all up there. But then recon, I was on the division or the battalion basketball team and also the baseball team. And most of those guys, or some of my buddies, were in recon. That's where Partridge came from.
Okay.
Milt, and then Lou Reynolds, who I just heard just died down in Florida. He got hit up on Barbie. Got hit right along the eye here, bullet hit him. And I got a little side story, if you don't mind.
Absolutely, we got time.
A guy named Mike DeFibio was killed up on that Barbie. And there is a tank destroyers group association. I got this. Over in Holland, there's a Henry Chappell cemetery over there. And most of the guys we lost are buried in that cemetery. Yeah. And there's a couple wrote over here wanting to know something. They're taking care, they adopted two, and evidently a lot of people do this, which is great.
Sure.
In Belgium, they put flowers on the graves of American soldiers. And it's DeFibio. They wanted to know something about him, and a guy named Cochran, I think his name was. And they've adopted, he and his wife adopted these two graves. Yeah. Like they were their sons. Sure. I think that is so neat.
Oh, isn't that?
That is so neat. Yeah, they do that, evidently.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And they wanted to know something. And then Robbie, good friend of mine who's up in Washington, Ohio, and he came very close to getting it. The Fibio was in his M8 when they got hit. And he knew how to reach DeFibio's sister. So and put them, and that family came over, and they met him. It's quite a story.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I should say. Well, the French have done a wonderful job, I understand. I've never been there, but in maintaining those cemeteries and everything.
I guess, yeah. You know, unfortunately, we did not have, if you talk to a lot of World War II guys, we didn't think too highly of the French.
Well, I know of the
not at all.
Yeah. Not even the civilians?
No.
I'll be darned.
In fact, I give you a little sidelight. We were at Fontainebleau. We had just liberated Paris like a month or two before, lost guys and everything else. Yeah. We got in, I went in one day into Paris, went to the Folies Bergère, the girly show, you know. I had to pay to go into the John, I had to pay to get out.
For heaven's sake.
Yeah, so many francs, I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
Had to pay to get in, had to pay to get out.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'll be darned. Well.
But we didn't, there's a lot of things happen. Belgium were great.
Belgians were great.
Yeah, frankly, as crazy as it sounds, you wound up having respect for the Germans.
Yes.
Those guys were no different than we were.
Yeah, there was so many of them were just I mean, they were locked in. They couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
I mean, they were, you know, well,
And I got discharged about December 15th of 45. I got home for Christmas. That year,
December
so,
15th, 1945.
yeah, yeah.
So you were in what, 3 years?
From 42, yeah,
Yeah.
42 to 45.
Wow.
And then I had 4 years in reserve.
Right.
I went in reserve for 4. I went in for 3, and then Truman's added on another year, called it Truman's year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, were you in the Korean War too?
No.
No, you
No,
didn't
no.
have to go to that.
No.
That's good. That's good.
Well, that was during that same time.
Yeah, but you were in.
Yeah, I was in the reserve
In
at that
reserve,
time.
yeah.
I remember playing ball at Deer Creek Commons, and the headlines in the paper that day, 50,000 reservists called to active duty.
Gee.
In my mind, one name, I had a little girl at that time, married and had a little girl, who's now 60, up in Wisconsin. I just came back from. And I thought I was gone.
Oh, my
But we
God.
were gone.
And that was a terrible thing.
Yeah.
Well, now tell us about peacetime. You got back. You met a gal that you married, and
Yeah. Met her May the 18th, 47. And we were married the 22nd of November of that same year, 6 months later. I was ready to get married.
She was from here?
From Northern Kentucky. We met her at Moonlight Gardens. She's from Dayton, Kentucky.
Oh, for God's sakes.
Kentucky
Good old
girl.
Moonlight Gardens.
Yeah, good old Moonlight.
Yeah, dancing to the big bands
Oh,
out there.
Dreamt about that,
Great
man.
stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
I had a pretty good deal. The guy, Tabby, on the gate, on the main gate, he was my high school basketball coach. He let us in free and act like he's charged us, and he wasn't.
Sure.
We got in free. And then Moonlight Gardens, 3 or 4 of the managers were friends of mine.
Nice.
I had a cheap date. It worked out pretty
Oh,
good.
yeah.
Worked out
Well, you were on the east side there.
Yeah.
You were
pretty-
nearby.
yeah,
That
right down
was-
over the hill.
That was a heck of a deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, you and River Downs right there and everything.
Yeah.
Did you ever have any contact with the horse race business?
No, I'm not a
No.
horse race person.
No. So now, you're married, you had children. How
I
many?
had 2 girls.
2 girls?
Unfortunately, we lost our youngest daughter at 23 in 77. She had a 7-month-old and a 2-year-old. She died of acute coronary myopathy.
Oh, my goodness.
And then my son-in-law remarried. But the 2 grandmas raised the little guys, the boys, who the 2-year-old has done 2 tours in Iraq, got the Bronze Star East Tour.
No, I met
You met him.
somebody at your house.
That probably was Matt. That could have been the youngest one. I don't think Bry was in then.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I've got Brian he's got 10 years in. He's going to do a career. Going to do a career now.
Right.
Right now, he's in command with Special Forces down at Bragg, Fort Bragg.
Wow.
And then I mentioned earlier my great-grandson, who just made a great-great-grandfather out of me. He graduated from the Citadel and a commissioned officer, and went to, he's down in Fort Campbell, Kentucky,
Oh.
in the 101st Airborne.
And what's his?
He's scheduled to go to Afghanistan in February, which
Oh, gosh.
again, it worries me.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah,
Yeah, that is, I'm fearful about Afghanistan.
Yeah, I am
We're
too.
in so many, the British, the Russians, the
Yeah.
Chinese have all, oh gee. Well, Jim, this has just been so terrific. Now, you had a successful career in insurance business?
I was in sales, insurance business.
Yeah.
I've been in sales. I was in sales most of my life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. Yeah,
So,
you and I have a
right.
particular feel about that. But you've always been here. You didn't move to California?
Well, I went in insurance. I went into home office at one point, in just about every position there. And I was invited in, and then back in '63, I went into Boston, in the home office of John Hancock.
Oh, yes.
The idea at that time was you went in, you spent a year or 2 up there, you visited other general agencies, you talked to the GAs, you observed, to prepare you to take over.
Sure.
And I wound up in Quad Cities, out on Iowa and Illinois. I had 22 counties in eastern Iowa and 5 in western Illinois.
How long were you there?
2 years, or about 2.5 years.
Yeah.
and got
I
caught
bet
up.
you always wanted to come
Got
back.
caught up in politics. The superintendent of agencies put his brother-in-law in. So what are you going to do? And so then,
The old
so,
boy
yeah.
network.
So then I came back to Cincinnati Manager Sun Life out of Canada. They were looking for someone, and things kind of fell together.
Good for
And
you.
eventually I wound up going back to Hancock, but
Yeah.
that's pretty much
Well,
it.
you've been an amazing, wonderful citizen, and
I am very proud of, and I mentioned a little bit earlier, a lot of military history in the family.
yes.
Great uncle, most of it Civil War, coming out of Civil War. But one, a graduate of West Point. He retired a major general, and he died at 60. He had more things in his life. He was the first one to climb Mount Rainier for Station Fort Steilacoom, Washington.
You gave me that thing
Yeah.
to read about that.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Climbed Mount Rainier, and then he was wounded twice by the Indians. He was in on the capture of Morgan. He was a cavalry general.
Yep.
And he's also the military commissioner tried to assassinate of Booth, or of Lincoln. And then his brother, Albert, was, and he wound up a rear admiral, retired out of Annapolis. He went to Annapolis, Navy. 1895, I think he was commander of the Pacific Fleet.
Wow.
And with sailing ships, I guess, at
Yeah.
that time, whatever they had.
Well,
And then
1890s, it was pretty much steam by this
Was
time.
it steam then?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And then, of course, right after that, just the turn of the century, 1906,
Yeah.
was the Great White Fleet that
Oh, okay.
President Roosevelt sent around the world.
Yeah.
But the Kautzes, that's a family
Right.
name. And as you and I have talked, there are Kautzes here in this area.
Right. Right.
And,
I gotta call him.
so you've got a tremendous background and just a wonderful story to tell. And sadly, you lost your wife. And,
Yeah. 2.5 years ago.
2.5 years ago.
Lost a daughter.
Yeah. lost
We
your
had two
daughter.
girls.
And your other daughter's up in Wisconsin.
She's up in Wisconsin. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's up there doing well.
That is so nice. And I'm just sure she's so proud of her dad.
Uh-huh.
My goodness sakes.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other incident particular that you'd like to tell us about? We've got a couple of minutes.
Well, I just recently, I met something kind of ironic. My wife had COPD and she smoked for 45 years, and as she said, nobody held a gun to her head, to make her smoke, but
Yeah.
she did, and eventually it cost her life. And white burley tobacco was discovered on my great-grandfather. He was a company commander in the 50 G Company, 59th Ohio Regiment in Ohio. Saw a lot of the battles, much in the battles.
Oh, the Ohio.
But yeah, it was discovered, white burley was discovered on his farm. And there's a monument right now up in Ripley, Ohio, in front of the Tobacco Museum up there. There's a tobacco museum.
Yep.
And I was up there Sunday and got to see a guy portraying my grandfather, great-grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of interesting.
I should say so.
About 140 years old.
Yeah.
But,
Well, this country, of course, you mentioned the Ohio,
yeah,
the OVI, Ohio Volunteer Infantry. So such tremendous history.
All
Civil War. Okay, we got a couple of minutes.
Oh.
Any other funny incident that you can think of about being in the Bulge, for example?
Trying to think
You
of
told us
possibly
about the
anything.
Germans in the tanks and the.
Yeah.
That's an amazing story.
Oh, what do you mean, Barkman?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good heavens.
Yeah, it's, there was George Winter, and I think he just passed away. He wrote several books on the Bulge. He was fascinated with it. And one of them was Manhand the Ardennes, which I have. And we got the first 2 pages in there. But he got to know Barkman very well. And they went to each other's home and so forth. But it's still intriguing, and that those guys, to say a lot of them, I mean, soldiers are soldiers. And I do have one little story might interest you, might add. And this, if I get time enough, when we were 83rd going across, my daughter always insisted when I gave any kind of a talk or anything to mention this. We to the 83rd took a town to 329th Regiment, or 329th Regiment. And unfortunately, civilians had killed a couple GIs in the 329th. And the next town we came into it, took it pretty quick. And typically what happens when you take that, you set up a perimeter defense. And if you got a crossroad here, you're gonna set up a gun or a tank or two, cover that in case you have a counterattack, you know,
Sure.
they come back. So this town, I don't remember, it could have been Bad Lips, I don't know what it was. But anyway, we covered this crossroad, and if there's a house around, you're not gonna sleep on the ground, or you're not gonna sleep on top of your tank or TD. You go in the house, which we did. Our driver, Broadzeller, spoke fluent German, and I remember going up these steps, and the housefrau, and then we scared the hell out of her, as you can imagine. She didn't even know we're there, but she was cooking or something, making cookies. I don't know what she's doing. But we finally told her that we weren't going to hurt her, we weren't going to take anything. But we still had this incident with the guys, you know, the civilians that had killed a couple of 83rd guys. So anyway, she had 3 sons. She brought these pictures out, telling her about her 3 sons in the German army. I don't know where her husband was. She never did mention him. But she had her 3 sons. One was in Russia, and one was in Italy. Maybe the other one, she didn't know where he was.
Oh my goodness.
But anyway, we went to bed that night, and 2 of us in a bed. We told her she could stay in her room in the corner. And there's just a dim light in there. I still remember this. Told the story enough, I guess. But anyway, I saw the door open, and I wasn't asleep, but I acted like I was. I pulled the covers back because I didn't know what she was going to do. Because she came to our bed, and stood there looking. I got one eye watching her, and had the covers. If she had a gun or a knife, I was going to take her down, you know. Anyway, she stood there and looking down at us, and all of a sudden she reached down and took the covers and tucked us in bed.
Tucked you in bed.
Yeah, isn't that something?
A mother is a mother.
Mother is a mother.
Isn't that?
Whether she was making believe that we were her sons,
Sure.
home, or hoping maybe a mother somewhere else was,
Yeah.
you know.
She
but
probably didn't. She probably.
I never forgotten that one, and then my daughter always insisted, you know, wanted me to tell the story. But,
That's a beautiful story.
Yeah,
Beautiful story. Jim, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's been
You're
a great
welcome.
honor.
My pleasure.
And especially with a dear friend such as you, to have this great
Yeah.
story. And I know that your family and your friends are going to love seeing this DVD.
Thank you.